Everybody knows that communism on paper looks totally different from communism in real life. But the moment you say that capitalism is different in reality and that the way libertarians imagine it has never actually existed, you are crossing a line. And I'm not saying that capitalism is good or bad, I don't give a shit. To me, this is like asking whether gravity is good or bad. It is here and exists independently from what you think about it. You probably got taught in school that capitalism consists out of free markets, small government and private property rights, and that these are the only properties of the system. But the real life counterpart has a lot more of them, so if this is a video game and you don't use all mechanics available, you will lose. When I start revealing these rules, people always say something like, oh, but that's globalism, that's the government and the globalists. Those people sound exactly like that one guy who goes like, let's say to the fighting gym. And I mean the guy who is completely obsessed with fighting the right way. The way it is described in some textbook. He is so picky about it that he refuses to fight everybody who disagrees with his bullshit. And the worst part is, his mentality actually works inside his local gym bubble where he wins all the tournaments. But one day he goes outside and gets into a real world street fight where his ass gets kicked beyond imagination. Why? Because his opponent doesn't give a shit about the rules. His opponent only cares about winning. That's why conservative libertarians always lose to George Soros, who is better at capitalism than they will ever be. So now you have two choices. You can either keep complaining about the globalists and how they don't care about your textbook capitalism, or you can ask yourself, okay, so how does real world capitalism actually work? These rules always emerge out of human nature. It's basic incentives and game theory. Everybody who doesn't play by them will naturally get selected out of the market. Capital is actually transnational. It doesn't give a shit about borders and about your local liberal democracy. Maybe you care, but the guy you are competing against doesn't. I mean, do as you want, produce your product locally, but let's say I, as your competitor, go to a different country, and just for the sake of it, let's say I go to a so-called socialist country. And why do I go there? Because I know that real life socialism doesn't actually exist, and the elites which rule that specific country also know it. And do you know what that ruling elite also likes? Money! They want Western private jets too, and me with my capital can enable that. All they have to do in return is to give me access to their local pool of slave labor. Now I go back with all the billions I've made in poor countries, and because I'm such an amazing human being, at least back in my home country, I start lobbying there to improve workers' rights and increase HR bullshit to the point where you can't compete and have to close. And my lobbying at home is also good for the elite in the poor so-called socialist country, because now they can make even more money for themselves. And then you have, let's say, another country with a different elite which provides an offshore tax haven for all of us in the club, and another country can be used for social experiments, mostly smaller, less relevant European countries. And by social experiments I mean, for example, a small and controlled test run of things like mass immigration or homosexuality. And if it has the desired outcome on the local population, these changes then get rolled out to all other countries completely by sheer coincidence. The only thing I'm not allowed to do as a billionaire is to interfere with the interests of my other billionaire peers. This is why they have to organize behind the scenes, because if they don't, a different group of elites will eat their lunch. And that's why, controversial opinion, but in my view, socialist countries don't really exist because all countries are part of the same capitalist world system. But what if one country refuses to collaborate? That is when a different mechanic from real world capitalism comes into play. Secret services. They do the dirty job of subverting and overthrowing unfavorable foreign governments. Oh, you say you don't have connections to secret services to make sure that your company will be the one to rebuild this overthrown foreign country? Too bad, because the billionaire you compete against has these connections. Now you will be naturally selected out of competing in the market. And this natural selection doesn't only apply to individuals but also to entire countries. So if your country doesn't have a CIA, Mossad or MI6 counterpart, your country will be demoted to a lower tier periphery. Without connections to organizations like DARPA or connections to people around intelligence agencies, we would not have Google, Palantir or Facebook. Without government bailouts and subsidies, we would not have Elon Musk. And I'm not saying this is good or bad, I'm saying that you have to network like your life depends on it. They play by different rules and have access to insider trading, where they meet on private islands and discuss the health of companies before the public gets to know about it. And you are just sitting there trying to compete with your technical analysis. They can afford to spend 10 years burning through investors' money without making any profit. Why? Because this enables growth of retarded proportions. And by the time they become profitable, they have a monopoly. You don't have the same access to capital. And if you manage to make any profits, the government takes half of it and uses it to build more refugee camps. And all of that happens because you are not able to take advantage of offshore tax havens. So you either move to a country which doesn't hate you, or you stay and watch how foreign NGOs influence the public around you. Those NGOs are almost always left-wing. Let that sink in. They live in a country different from yours where they own billion-dollar companies, but then lobby in your country to increase taxes and regulation. And when you dare to complain or even mention how your country is now unable to compete, they will show you a study, funded by large tech companies, on how you just need more DEI and more women in leadership positions, and then your company will magically become the next Google. Remember, those are the people who live the farthest away from refugee camps. And when you point it out, they always reply with, "But actually we want more refugee camps in our neighborhood. Unfortunately, 10 years ago, a very rare bird has taken a shit in my garden. And now the entire neighborhood is a protected nature reserve where camps are forbidden." This is all that NGOs are about, influencing competing countries. If you don't participate in this game, you get selected out of it. They have access to billion-dollar think tanks which research where the world is heading and how to stay in power for generations. The biggest problems the elites are facing right now is that the system, which I have described in this video, is slowly fading away, which is why they are so obsessed with building a brand new one, where you will be a depressed loser with no economic power.